A J-Mix exclusive.
Orlando, they scared that nigga so bad. Okay, you know, Roslyn went to school with him. Right. So she really believes that that fool is scared. They scared him into, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's what everyone thinks. He was paid off. That's what everybody thinks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because he was up there, he was testifying for them.
Exactly.
Now, you don't take no ass whooping like that unless something's up. Unless the goose is cooked. Because Rodman was like, that's Orlando. So she got on the phone with some of her girlfriends she went to school with. Next thing you know, she goes, you know what? That ain't normal Orlando. Now, something happened to him. So she thinks that either he got paid off or they said, hey, motherfucker, okay. You got to remember, you got to come back to LBC.
Hello all, this is J-Mix here, and I'd like to welcome all my YouTube subs and viewers to proof that Frank Alexander was threatened by Death Row Records. My exclusive interview with Mr. RJ Bond. What's been going on with you, RJ? It's been a while since we talked. What's up?
Well, you know, I catch up with the boards from time to time, and it's good to talk to you again, Jess. One of the things that I'm looking at when I see these boards is everybody keeps asking me about, when's the next movie going to come out, and I keep putting it off. So I guess it's appropriate that I give everybody an update of what's going on. We got a book. The book is actually being ghostwritten right now, and it's not ghostwritten because I don't know how to write a book. It's just I don't know how to format a book. So essentially what we've done is we've hired a guy, a professional writer, to come in, and he's taking what was, I want to say about a 750-page manuscript, and he's trying to tighten it down to like 300 pages or so. Essentially, when I started this thing, I kind of wanted to go back to all the source material that I had gotten for all the research for the movies and do like a 9/11 report, like a Warren Commission 9/11 report on the shooting, almost down to the minute. And at this stage in the ball game, we can account almost by the minute the last 12 hours of Tupac's life, almost down to the minute. So it's kind of fun to take a look at and do, but the book was getting kind of wordy. So we brought an author in to kind of tighten it down a little bit. So that's the book.
RJ, is the book the excerpts that you've been posting on Tupac Nation?
Actually, no. Well, it's what we've cut. Essentially, there was originally going to be two parts to the book. The first one is an explanation of what we believe to be the definitive story of exactly what happened and exactly why it happened. And the second half of the book was really going to be about the disinformation campaign, or what I call the obfuscation of the case. Because, the whole secret sauce to getting out of a murder case is to raise reasonable doubt. And if you're a good attorney like David Kenner, who had defended Snoop Dogg for murder and all that, that's the first thing a defense attorney knows. You raise enough doubt, especially reasonable doubt in a murder case, you're going to get your people off. So the first thing you do is you go to work to try to do everything you can to obfuscate it and to blur it up so it creates that reasonable doubt. And that was the second part of the book. So what we ended up doing was, when we got with the publisher and we got with the writer on it, he was like, well, let's just focus on the first part. Let's just put our story out there. Let's not worry about disproving the other stories. Let's just put our story out there, and it should carry its own weight. And for the book that we put out, I agreed with that, and we kind of agreed to let that happen. But I still feel very strongly, because there's a lot of people running around right now that claim to be authorities on what's going on, and they claim to be solving the case and all that crap. And at the end of the day, all they're doing is running around spreading a lie. And I think when people's, kind of when the scales fall off of people's eyes and they understand exactly what bullshit these guys are really putting out and why they're putting out the bullshit, then I think there's a lot of noise that goes down from the other side. It just makes me sad to see the same crap being brought up over and over and over again, and at the end of the day, there's really nothing behind it. It comes out of the blue. It comes, really from nowhere, and it doesn't take much to knock it down. If you go to Tupac Nation and you go up there, I'm going to be posting excerpts from the book, parts that were cut out from the book. I'm going to be putting it up there, and if you ever want to read what's going on, read it. I try to reference everything I can with documents. I try to reference everything I can with references, and it's not just, hey, go look it up on the internet. Now, it's got to be a little bit more than that. So if you get a chance to read it, that's where I'm putting the information out there, and I'm going to keep putting the information out there up to and including the book.
Which report is it out of the three that they're looking that you have? Because he told me, he said,
the one that I think that came up is actually, I think, a Compton Police Department report.
Mr. Kenner, I have never spoken to Compton Police Department. Never. I've never been inside of a Compton Police Department.
Do you assume to know who shot Tupac Shakur?
We think we do. Actually, we think we do. We think we know who the shooters are. We think we know, or were. We think we know who was behind it and why. We think we know who were the victims and who were the suspects. We think we know why certain people were killed afterwards, and they were killed in an order, and they were killed on purpose for who they were, and it's directly related to why they were killed. So yeah, I mean, we really think we've locked this one down. And like I said a second ago, and I guess I'm repeating myself, but when you look at any one of the killings that happened after Tupac got killed, and you look at them, you cannot just look at them at face value. You have to look at who was killed and the significance of who was killed. Why were those people killed? Because it was intentional. They would have you believe that some stupid gang war happened and people were just indiscriminately offing other people, and that's not the case. Each and every single person that was killed actually was killed for a reason, and it was not random by any stretch of the imagination.
They don't want you around. What did I just say? Period. How you know? He said it right out of his mouth, and his girlfriend confirmed it. Who, Reggie? Yeah. What did he say? Say what you did. He said they want me dead. He said that they said you told a lot of stuff against Suge and Buntry and Pac. The police. I did. Yes, they said that they got a police report saying that you said that Frank, I'm putting my ass in. You scared me. That you said that Suge was kicking, that Buntry was, Tupac was beating the guy up also. I never said any of that.
Wait a minute, RJ, are you denying that a gang war happened after the shooting of Tupac Shakur?
Well, we're going to get into that a little bit, post a little bit later in the book, because I do talk about that at great length in the book. Even the Compton police came out and said that any gang war that happened had no relation to Tupac. I mean, Compton police were the first ones, even before or while Tim Brennan was writing his affidavit, which is what's really kind of weird, that the left hand, for some reason, either didn't know what the right hand are doing or the right hand didn't care what the left hand was doing. But they came out right away and said, listen, this gang war that is happening had nothing to do with the Shakur case. So no, I mean, I'm not denying that people got killed. People definitely got killed. But when you talk about a gang war is a very big word for a series of half a dozen shootings. I don't know that that's a war. These people were targeted, they were killed, and all the people that should have been killed weren't killed, and a lot of people that were killed, nobody understood why. It appeared to be random, and that's why it gave this whole myth of being a war, because there wasn't really at the time, a rhyme or reason to why these people that were being killed were being killed. So I'm not denying that there was a gang war. I mean, there were shootings that followed the Tupac case. But again, like a lot of other things, it tends to be kind of colored and kind of exaggerated over time.
All right, RJ, I gotta ask you, what is your take on this Lloyd Lake guy teaming up with Reggie Wright, coming out and saying Suge Knight is a snitch, and even the fact that Reggie Wright is coming out and saying anything at all?
First off, let me tell you, Reggie Wright's a hypocrite. Okay, I can tell you that right now, because in 2007, when we put the first Tupac assassination documentary out, Reggie got on interviews with allhiphop.com. I didn't know what the financial situation was. I knew that they were all happy. I didn't get into it. I was just a security guy. I made a mistake hiring certain people like Frank and Michael Moore and Kevin Hackey, and they're all lying and they're all, blah, blah, blah. But he did everything he could to understate and underplay what his role was with Death Row. That was back in 2007. And like I said, you can go to Thug Life Army, you can go to allhiphop.com, and I don't really want you to. I want you to stay with my friends at Tupac Nation. But if you have to go research it, go to those sites and go and look at the interviews, because they're out there. I mean, that's the thing about interviews, that they kind of last forever. And look at how he downplays himself and tries to downplay his role. Yet now, here we are 7 years later, and suddenly he knows everything about what was going on with Death Row. He was running Death Row. He knew all about the record deals with the different artists and the points that they were being paid and whether or not Tupac Shakur was owed money. I mean, this flies directly in the face of everything that he said in the past. So what the hell are you going to believe about this clown? Because he comes back says one thing in 2007, turns around and says something completely the opposite in 2014. And I think it's for a reason. But then again, people like to talk. People like to hear themselves talk. And you get guys like Reggie, and you get guys that, really want to talk about, puff themselves up and make themselves bigger than what they are. I also think it's very fascinating and very interesting, the timing of all this Lloyd Lake and Reggie Wright nonsense, because, they could have come out at the time Greg Kading put his book out. They could have come out, especially if they were big fans, as they claim to be, of Greg Kading's work and how Reggie Wright helped Greg Kading. Well, then how come Reggie Wright didn't help Greg Kading promote his book? Probably could have gotten a few more viewers and a little more traction if he had decided to come out of the closet then, like he's come out of the closet now. But of course now we're out to raise $150,000 before we tell anybody anything. But let me tell you what a great guy I am and how I single-handedly ran Death Row Records and how Suge Knight's a punk. Really? Now? I think that he's a hypocrite first. The second thing is he's not credible because of everything I just said. The guy comes out and he tells one thing on one side of his mouth and says something completely different out of the other side of his mouth. He runs around saying things like the chain snatch happened at a certain time, and everybody else says the chain snatch happened months earlier. Some people say the chain snatch happened during the day. Nobody can get their story straight, and that's a problem with lies. It's really hard to keep them straight.
If you can get lost and not get subpoenaed today, I think you'll be fine. Man, Reggie.
Reggie Wright recently has taken some shots at your friend Frank Alexander. It's been a year almost to the day of his passing. How do you feel about them taking shots at Frank?
Well, I have a couple of thoughts about that. The first thing is I miss my friend. It's been a year. I miss my friend. There's not a single day that goes by that I'm not driving around that I don't miss just picking up the phone and being able to call him and shoot the shit for no apparent reason. I've recently been listening to some taped interviews and some recordings and that, and and listening to him talking on the phone, and it takes me back. So that's what I have to say about that. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But the other thing that I have to say is I find it really interesting that Reggie doesn't say shit about anything. Like I said, doesn't promote Greg Kading's book. Oh, he's a big fan. Oh, he even claims that he worked with Greg Kading on his book and that he helped Greg Kading with his book. Well, okay. Well, I didn't see any acknowledgement from Greg Kading in the acknowledgement section. Thank you, Reggie Wright, for all your help. But that's neither here nor there. What I'm talking about is that here we go, Reggie saying, oh, I helped Greg Kading. Well, he wasn't around promoting Greg Kading's book when Greg Kading was putting his book out, and that was while Frank was still alive. Yet Frank's dead. Michael Moore dies about a month after that. These two key witnesses that knew more about what was going on with Death Row than apparently Reggie did, and they die, and all of a sudden now Reggie's going to talk a whole story. Reggie's telling everybody whatever they want to know. He's everywhere. He's all over the web. He's all over the magazine interviews. He's all over everywhere, and he's want to tell his story. And I think the timing of it is really suspect because, he had plenty of opportunities to do it before, and it would have actually probably been better for him to have done that. But I understand why he'd wait for Frank to die, because that's the only time that he's ever going to be able to say what he has to say and have somebody not refute it.
RJ, was Frank really afraid of the people that were at Death Row Records?
Well, Frank wasn't scared of him at the end, but Frank was terrified at the beginning of it. And one thing that people don't know is that when we were making Tupac Assassination 2, Frank let it be known to me that he had made some tapes of some telephone interviews, and he gave me a couple of clips that he had because he had been recording some phone calls. After Frank died, I got basically, this is a guess, but about 10 hours of taped phone conversations between Frank and name it, Reggie, Kevin Hackey, Michael Moore, his friend Larry, who worked at Death Row, David Kenner, the LA County District Attorney. All of these conversations that he had, and it really was in one point in time where shortly after the shooting, they were trying to get Frank to testify for Suge on the Orlando Anderson beating, if you want to call it a beating, and what they were trying to get for Suge's parole violation. At the time, they were trying to subpoena Frank. And Frank had done 2 interviews. He had done an interview with Brett Becker the night of the shooting, and then he did a subsequent interview with Brett Becker a couple of weeks after that. And I've got all of these tapes, and the mistake that a lot of these clowns are making is not understanding or not knowing that Frank, who was terrified for his life when they said that Death Row wants you dead, and he was threatened directly not only by people at Death Row, but also threatened by Reggie himself, who after he threatened him, he goes, well, I'm not threatening you. Yeah, okay, sure. But yeah, he was threatened and he was scared to death. And here we go with Frank being in the frame of mind that he was and being nervous. And they weren't just threatening Frank, they were threatening his wife. And listen, motherfuckers, don't tell me that that's not the case, because I have tapes where those words were said. I've heard them. I heard the phone calls. Frank was not only being threatened, his family was being threatened. And I've got proof of it.
They recommend you don't get subpoenaed, or whatever that's worth. I don't know what it means, but that's what they told me to tell you.
No, they tried to. They tried you down? Yeah, they're going to try to subpoena me for the next court date, which is, I think, the 25th. But anyway, I just heard that they want me dead. That's what I just heard. I just got a phone call saying that they want me dead.
Okay. So I wasn't going to say this, but I think I better. Okay, that's affirmative. That's true.
What do you mean?
I don't know, how can I say this where it doesn't? That rumor is out there. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. That rumor is out there. From the sources that I talk to, they're taking it personal. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. They're taking it as, he fucked us. Trust me, I'm telling you just by what Norris is saying, and then by my little buddy that feeds me information. That is the word. Mm-hmm. They want to finish you off. Mm-hmm. And then after, talking to Larry and And the other people that I know, that rumor got back to me too. They used the word, "we'll fix him and his wife." So I was like, oh, shit. Because they were telling me that if it didn't go, if whatever you said wasn't positive, they were going to fix you. If Suge don't get out, boy, you're going to be in deep trouble, Frank. Who? You. What they're saying is, if you swing to their story, right, then they're not going to hold you accountable. In other words, if you play ball with them, it'll look better if you play ball. But if you don't play ball, you see what I'm trying to say? Which comes to the next thing. Did they want you to change your story?
So, yeah, why would Frank want to say one thing? A lot of people have accused Frank of recanting. Well, let me tell you something. Frank changed his story. Kevin Hackey changed his story. Everybody's changed his story. Reggie changed his story. Everybody's changed his story. But the reason Frank changed his story and the reason Kevin changed their story was because they were scared. Their lives were being threatened. And, that doesn't mean that later you're not going to go back to what your original story was. But in the land of Tupac, recanting seems to be something that everybody does.
RJ, it's been a year since Frank passed away. Are there any updates on what happened to Frank?
Yeah, well, a lot's become much clearer over the years. And, it's funny because in one aspect, a lot of what happened around the death of Tupac and people not wanting to talk about it and things like that, Frank's death mirrors that and parallels that in a lot of different ways, because right after Frank died, for about the first, I would say probably 3 or 4 weeks up until his funeral in May, not a lot of people were talking. There was a lot of questions, but very few answers. And a lot of people were talking about it. And of course, by that time, the autopsy hadn't come back yet. There was questions. The detectives hadn't released a final report. There was a lot of facts that weren't known at the time. And of course, the most important thing, and something that Frank alluded to with the Tupac situation, is that nobody had time to actually take a deep breath, step back, and think about what happened calmly and quietly. Nobody had the opportunity to do that. I think once you get out of the heat, you get out of the sorrow, and for me, the grieving process is over, you begin to think a little bit more clearly about the events. You think more objectively. And yeah, there was a lot of shit that was going on at the time. Personally, and this is just my personal opinion, nobody's perfect, and Frank was certainly not a perfect individual. Frank was a flawed individual, like we all are. But Frank had a great heart, and he was a good friend. Now, that said, I think there are some questions that were never resolved in the murder itself, the suicide, whatever you want to call it. Because unfortunately, when you have a situation where people are threatening you, and the threats are not just external, but they're internal, you have people like, I used to hear conversations all the time. Frank would be on the phone talking to me, and we'd be going to the movies, and Frank's wife wouldn't stop calling. She was just like Fatal Attraction, obsessed with Frank. And she would not, and this is when Frank hadn't done anything. Frank was just Frank. And we go to the movies. She would call him like 5 times while we were at the movies. What are you doing? Oh, I'm at the movies. Well, we're sitting there watching the movies. But she'd always invent these crazy-ass reasons to call him about some drama that she was having. And most of it was bullshit. There was nothing to it. But she just either was bored at home, or she didn't have any friends. And so she would call him all the time. She would call him 4 or 5 times in a 2-hour interval. And would want to do that because she was so demanding of his attention. And it was like that. Frank talked about her all the time like she was like a child, that she, really didn't know how to defend or take care of herself. And he felt bad for her like a child. And that's really how she behaved. And, towards the end, there was some severe, substantial arguments that were happening between the two of them. And, I heard the arguments, and I heard her threaten him. She threatened him a dozen times. And, and yet when it looks like it's a suicide and it looks like somebody killed themselves. I mean, I was just watching on 2020 not more than a week ago where they had to reopen a case like that was 8 years old because because everybody said it was a suicide, it was a suicide, it was a suicide, and the relatives were just insistent that it couldn't have been. And there was finally enough information that they were doing. They turned it over. It wasn't a suicide. But it's very easy for cops to clear a case and say it was a suicide. If it looks and smells like a suicide, then it's a suicide. But there's a lot of questions that I have because there was a lot of freaking motive at the time for it not to be a suicide. And you can make shit look like a suicide all day long, especially if you got people that live around the neighborhood that are cops. And you got people around the neighborhood that you know, and why aren't you calling 911 from your own house? Why are you calling 911 from down the street at the local cop's house and you're all hysterical about it, but you don't have the presence of mind just to call 911 from your house? We don't know how long it was between the time that she called from that. And Frank told me flat out personally that the reason that they had a fight and the reason that it was all, and I think, she even told me that because when he got home, his gun safe was open. Somebody been tampering with his gun safe. Well, that's the first thing. When you're upset and you're mad about something, sometimes you lose focus and you lose objectivity. I'm sitting in there and somebody's opened my safe and is going through my personal things, and whether it's my wife or anybody else, and that's a point of contention between the two of us, we're going to sit and argue about something. And you know what? I may not think about checking to see whether or not my gun is chambered or whether or not there's a round in the chamber, when I would never keep a round in the chamber, that there's actually a round in the chamber, and I wouldn't know there was a round in the chamber because I'm blinded by my being pissed off at the situation. And sometimes you don't think clearly and stuff like that. I mean, it's the classic example of somebody that, punches a wall and they break their hand because they punch a wall. Well, you really intend to want to break your own hand? No, but you got mad, you punched a wall, you did something out of frustration or anger, and you ended up hurting yourself. But to say that somebody's messing around with your gun safe first, and then you're pissed off about that, and that so-and-so has the combination of my gun safe, where he kept a lot of documents. He didn't just keep his guns there, but he kept a lot of documents and stuff there too. But suddenly somebody got the combination of your gun safe, and suddenly there's an accidental shooting that's about a gun from a guy who's been in the Marines for freaking years, handles guns all the time, and knows the difference. The only thing I can tell you is that, the whole thing is suspicious as hell to me. And the more time that went by, and ironically, the less that his wife has surfaced or talked to anybody that has been anywhere close to him at all, suddenly that nice expensive piece of property that Frank had, the guard gate on it and all that expensive piece of property got locked up real fast, and then it was all about get off my property. Okay, it's sometime later. I mean, she's turned on his daughter. She's turned on his grandchildren. She's turned on all those people. You have to ask yourself why. Why would you do that? Why would you alienate Frank's own grandchildren, especially if you claim to care about Frank at all? I definitely think that there's been a lot more that's been learned, and I think that there would be a good opportunity to do that. Now, I called the Marietta Police Department. There are a bunch of bozos there. I'll go on record of telling you that, because I called the Marietta Police Department a handful of times, and I've got proof that I did it because I called them from my cell phone, and I even stopped down to the Marietta Police Department several times to talk to somebody there, and they just showed me the door. They shooed me out. Now, I was his closest business partner, and I was one of his biggest business partners, and I was also his best friend of, 17 years. And yet those cops didn't have one single question for me about anything. No motive, no question about, well, could it have been foul play? Could it have been, what was the arguments like? Were they arguing? Oh, by the way, how come his wife didn't give the cops his cell phone that he had recorded all their arguments on, where she was threatening him, and she lied to him and told him that she didn't have the cell phone, she didn't know where it was. Then she deletes all the shit off of it and then gives him a wiped phone. I mean, come on. They took the convenient dodge that it looked like a suicide. He shot himself in the head, and there it is. Boom. There's no reason to look any further. We can clear it as that, so why bother to look any further? That's it. I don't feel like Frank spent a lot of time trying to get justice for his friend Tupac, but who's trying to get justice for Frank? Frank led a very tortured life, my friend. He was threatened constantly by people at death row. He was haunted by that. Those people never really went away, so that threat never really went away either. And, always living, your life kind of one eye over your shoulder. That's no way to live. And, I worry that Frank has peace now, but what was the cost to get that peace? But because I don't think he had any peace in his life. I don't really think he did. That's it. That's all I got to say about that.
Okay.
Hey,
What's up?
let's call it dead.
Who?
Kadafi.
Who?
Kadafi.
You got to be fucking kidding.
Okay, see, nigga, when I always tell you something, you don't be believing me.
Mike, you got to be kidding.
Kadafi is dead.
Who? How?
You ain't gonna believe this one.
Mike, what
Tell me
happened?
if you believe this.
What happened?
He committed suicide. Can you believe that?
Malcolm?
No.
No, that's Edie.
Kadafi. What's it called? It's Jasmine's son.
Yak.
Yak.
You got to be fucking kidding.
Yep.
Yak killed himself?
Now, do you believe that? Do you believe that he pulled the trigger on himself, Frank?
Man, let me tell you something. If you get weak, you'll do it.
Frank, he's
Well, let me tell you something. He's been with Tupac since day one. He's been with Tupac since day one. They grew up together. That was like his real fucking cousin. They weren't related, but they were like real cousins. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
Where did you get this from?
Last week, they called us from New Jersey this morning.
Who did?
I don't know what, Malcolm or whoever, one of the outlaws called us.
You got to be kidding.
Yep.
You know what? I had a note that I wanted to call Yasmin too. So that means she's in New Jersey then.
Yeah. He's gone. He's gone.
I should call Molly.
Huh?
I should call Molly. I have her home number.
See, I thought they was BSing with me, and they go, then Dave Lee came downstairs. He goes, hey, man, he's gone. And then Dave Lee came down with a different story. He said that the outlaws and them were playing with a gun. The gun went off, and they shot what's called in the head. Then the first story I heard was that he was by himself. He had the gun out, and he committed
Suicide.
suicide.
Did you know what kind of gun it was?
No. I have no clue what kind of gun it was.
I'll be down.
But I know it's definitely a confirmed kill.
Well, confirmed death.
Yeah, confirmed death.
Oh, man.
A J Mix exclusive.
What up, shut up?